Hey everybody. We'll get started here in a second. It's just going to be me today. Tim is unable to join us, but he should be back next week. And we're about 3 minutes past. Apologies for the delay in getting started, but we'll get going. Phil, thanks for hopping on. Good to have you. Placido, good to have you on. And we'll see who else joins us. But why don't we get rolling? So, today's session, um, I love going through this data. Every year, like once a year, it's kind of good to go through what's happening out there in terms of how are parents making decisions and what channels are influencing them. How's AI playing a role? Man, things are moving so fast, obviously, with technology. I mean, that's an obvious statement, but it's really impacting how families choose schools. And I also think we can make certain assumptions about what we should be doing. But the nice part is there's some big organizations out there, they do the survey data, and it's really great to see this data and how it should influence our decision making, especially when it comes to marketing, especially when it comes to expectations around admissions. And so, yeah, we're gonna dive into it, and it's interesting. I've been really looking at this data for a couple of years now. Some things remain the same, other things continue to change from year to year. So that those are some of the things that we'll get into. And today's just going to be, as always, a discussion. Um, Note taker. Okay. It's like I got a message, but the note taker's messaging me. All right. So here we go. Let me share my screen and let's go through what we got. Okay. So literally what I did was I was just doing research, look using AI to do some research, pulling different website data, and I just put in this really long document. I think it's 9 key data points or trends, or I should say eight key data points and trends, and then a wrap up here at nine in terms of what does this all mean. So we're just going to go through here in order because it's all related to how parents are choosing, what's influencing decisions, what are they looking for in a school. So it'll be good stuff, and it'll be if we can have a conversation around it, that's always great as well. But let's dive in. So first one, what are we finding now is why parents start to look at private schools. Like, what are they looking for? The last couple sessions we've had was all around messaging, so I think this goes a lot into messaging. Um, so well, I keep getting AI messages. Okay. Um, so niche, they're one of the resources. They do, by the way, if you don't if you haven't seen this from Niche, if you go to Niche Parent Surveys, they have a whole parent survey section that every year they provide these insights. And so it's really great data that we can pull from there. So in 2024, which seems like ages ago at this point, but that was their most recent data pull uh, from 2024, that when families are looking at a school, academics were the number one thing that they were looking for. So we can make a lot of assumptions about why families switch schools and what they're looking for. But if you're doing advertising, and I've noticed this for the last couple of years, especially if you're doing advertising, being able to advertise. Here we go. Let's add John. Hey, John. Good to have you on. We just got going. We're talking about some data and trends here. The first one we're looking at is what's motivating families to look for private schools, and especially with switching schools. So I believe this was directly from Niche that when they were interviewing families about when to switch schools, it was primarily for academic reasons. Now, other things like athletics and class sizes and safety, all these things played a role, but academics, you can see at 65% here, was the primary driver. So as you're thinking about your messaging, it's not that all of your messaging has to be around academics, but making sure that that's a focal point that's going to be attracting your parents. Um, Truth Tree did a survey of enrolled families. Parents start searching because of safety, nurturing, challenging environment. underwhelmed by quality of education. Obviously, I think this is going to be more what region of the country, the state, towns you're in, but safe and nurturing. I can again firsthand say that whenever I'm working with schools on their advertising, whenever we build campaigns around the concept of the environment, the safe, nurturing community, and what that looks like, those campaigns always do really well. So I could definitely corroborate that. Um, Ed Choice, they did a more than scores survey, 750 private school scholarship parents. What were they looking for? Better learning environment. That comes back to academics, education, academics. Smaller class sizes is interesting. That's definitely plays a role in versus public schools. If those are your main competitors. However, one of the things I take away from this is yes, parents typically want smaller class sizes. Yes, it's something we want to talk about. I would also say don't make it a driving factor. Make it just like a bullet, if anything, because if you're competing with other private schools, everybody can pretty much say the same thing. So that's not going to be a main driver. Um, and then the one thing that wasn't a main driver, there were standardized test scores. So, they weren't necessarily looking at your test scores and how well your school was doing with test scores. So that wasn't a big reason. So this is what parents are looking for. So my main takeaway here is that parents are looking for what's your environment, what are your academics, safety, and individual attention. So we want to be able to highlight academics without highlighting test scores. They didn't care too much about test scores, but it was more about academic readiness. So messaging that sounds like smaller, safer, focused on my child, our values, is going to align better than, hey, you're going to get higher scores down the road, right? So it's yes, it's prep, but talking about higher schools. And by the way, I haven't seen a lot of private schools talk in that way about getting higher test scores, so I actually don't think that's too big of a deal, at least from my perspective. But um, as somebody who's running campaigns a lot and working with a lot of schools on their campaigns, nailing down your messaging around these key points and making sure it includes that is always really important. Anything interesting there as we look at this data? Any insights here about what families are looking for? Maybe something you found for your particular school that was surprising or aligns with this?
I just think it comes up in the same way for retention purposes in terms of why people would leave. And everyone has a different perspective on what academic environment actually looks like.
Right.
Um, so fighting to keep people that you would want to keep versus fighting to bring people in that would might want your school, they're both, I think, two sides of the same coin in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and I look at it, and I completely agree with you. The part about keeping, it's really about reinforcing the value proposition, right? You said here's what you can expect when you come here. Here's the environment. Okay, now we got to deliver on that environment. And if they leave, you're going to be like, well, what about this environment didn't you like? Or what's going on? What aren't you finding? Um, so yeah, I think that's vitally important. That's a great point. Anything else before we move on? John, Fawcett, anybody? And if not, that's fine. All right. All right, let's go to point number two, which is how long parents research and when they start. This is something I've talked about a lot because this is something I pulled from Niche. But everywhere you look, no matter what survey data, True Tree survey, Niches survey, Cube Creative survey, um, is that there's a couple interesting points. One is close to 50% are spending at least 12 months researching and evaluating schools before enrollment. Only 10% actually decided in under a month. And usually those families are going to be like legacy families. They already knew they were coming there anyway. Um, but as you think about your marketing, I always, again, thinking back to those ad campaigns you might run, we always want that. I call them the now families or the today families. Would you like to enroll today or apply to? This is why also I almost always discourage families, or sorry, schools from running apply now or application deadline type ads. They almost never work. You might get somebody here or there, but it's just, I don't think it's a great use of money. Because anybody that's going to apply now, they're probably in your system already, and you can probably just communicate with them that way. I don't think it's worth the ad spend. So anyway, knowing that there are at least 12 months, I think well over 70% or at least 6 months, but 12 to 24 months, it's a long time, right? So we have to think about how do we nurture those families throughout the year. So if you get somebody that maybe comes to an event today, right? They attend your open house event. Yes, we want them to continue to move through the pipeline, but it might be another 6 months, 12 months before they make that enrollment decision. So the question becomes, how do we do that, right? And that's where we need email marketing. That's where your admissions team needs those monthly follow up tasks. Hey, follow up with this family if they haven't moved forward. All those things. Now, one other thing I wanted to point out here is this particular piece of data, which is a little bit different, which is 6 out of 10 parents are actively searching for schools throughout the year, not just during traditional enrollment windows. I think that's really important because everybody here probably has their own enrollment cycle. Maybe it's similar, but you have your own enrollment cycle. I think it's important to know, and I apologize if I. Hold on, submit Tiffany. There we go. Hey, Tiffany, thanks for hopping on. Um, just going through some data here, and we're talking about how long families take to actually make a decision. And what the data is telling us is that it's close to 50% are taking at least 12 months to make decisions. So there's a lot of time, research time, and how do we nurture those families? And one of the things I'm about to show, and I've showed this before, but it's always good to revisit it, especially this time of year as we're headed into holiday season. I want to show you kind of where we are in the Google Trends. So if we go to Google Trends and type in private schools, this shows search intent throughout the year. So let's do past 12 months. So this is a scale of 0 to 100 of search intent or interest. So how frequently are people going into the search engines and searching for things like private schools? So it just gives you a general sense of uh, high interest, low interest. And so getting back to this data point, 6 out of 10 are actively searching for schools throughout the year, which is pretty much represented exactly in this chart as well. So let me just walk through this chart again. If you haven't seen this before, if you have, it's just it'll be a repeat for you. But we are right here in early December, closing until mid-December. As we get to New Year's, you can see interest takes a nosedive. Now it doesn't go to zero, right? That obviously indicates there are people still searching, but it's the holiday time. As soon as we hit January, we hit a peak. By the time we get to end of January, February, we start hitting peak interest, and it stays relatively consistent, a little bit ups and downs, but pretty much until Memorial Day. You stay in this peak range. So that's where no matter what you're in, if you're admission cycle, enrollment cycle, hey, it ends in February, March, April, whatever, understand that families are still searching all the way through, and again, throughout the year, but especially through Memorial Day. So getting those families that are maybe making late decisions about where they want to go, or they're just figuring out which schools they're getting into, and they maybe need to make another decision. So having ads running, Google ads, still having events, still having tours, all very important at this stage. And then just to continue with this, as we hit Memorial Day through 4th of July, we hit a trough again. And then as we get end of summer, which again is kind of interesting, where you get end of July, we hit a peak again, all the way through the fall until we start diving down after Thanksgiving to where we are now. So again, the Google Trends kind of supports this data about how families are searching throughout the year. And that's why, like right now, I'm talking with a lot of schools about their advertising. Yeah, looking at your budget, I'd probably start scaling down your budget a little bit. But then as soon as January picks up, ramp the budget back up. So I'm talking with a lot of schools that have those January events. I don't necessarily feel a strong urge to run ads during December for January events, unless it's like early January, but most are usually mid to end of January. Keep some ads running, maybe cut the budget in half or by more. And then once you hit January 2nd, flip the switch, ramp the ad budget back up, and start filling those events. So again, takeaway: private school families, they're not impulse buying. Um, Almost half are in research mode for 12 months. And so you want to make sure your marketing's always on, your follow-up's always on, and not being invisible for part of that journey. Because if they may not be ready today, that doesn't mean they're not ready 6 months from now, 8 months from now, a year from now. So if you're following up with them, making sure they're getting your newsletter, once in a while, every check in with a personal check in. Hey, you attended our event a month ago. Just wanted to see if you're still interested, still searching. Any questions I can answer. Um, all good things to be doing throughout the year. Any questions on this? Any thoughts, questions? Is that surprising data to anybody in terms of the length of time it takes?
I could just say anecdotally, I our pre-K program doesn't fill up each year, but the earliest that I have given a tour to a family interested in our pre-K program, which starts at age 4, was the baby wasn't born yet.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And I was very impressed with their interest level, but quite shocked that they thought that they might have to get their name on a waiting list that far in advance.
Hey, that's good reputation. They got to get on that list quick. That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Well, there we go. So they'll be on the other end of that spectrum of waiting 4 years before enrolling or however long. Um, all right, cool. Let's keep rolling. Let's keep rolling. So, what platforms are people using? Um, Again, this is something that I continue to see more in a trend. I don't have this in front of me, but I was actually reading a social media report recently about the different generations and who's using what platforms. I'll talk about that here in a second. But in terms of families that are actively searching for schools, I don't think it's a shock that more than half are starting online with Google. So both Truth Tree and Niche cited that 50% of search is happening on Google. Niche does play a role. They might be looking at other platforms. The AI one is interesting, right? If you go to ChatGPT or even if you go to Google and you type in what's the best private school near me, now you're getting that AI blurb at the top of Google or AI blurb in ChatGPT. Something we're actually rolling out here with our software platform within the next week or so is AI search, helping schools show up in AI search. So if you go to ChatGPT or wherever and type in, "Hey, this is the type of school I'm looking for. Is it right for me?" Giving yourself an opportunity to show up there, just like you would show up in the search engine, showing up in AI search. Um, it's not look on one end it's not a huge driving force behind enrollment by any means. It may not even necessarily be a needle mover right now. But what I can say about AI is obviously it's not going anywhere. Obviously, this is something that is moving faster than anything we've ever experienced. I mean, I know that ChatGPT has their own browser now. There's more and more and more AI is getting there. So I think just getting yourself prepped and ready for the AI search is just a good thing to have. As we're sitting here today, that aside, making sure you're visible on Google, that can come in three ways, by the way. Just so well, actually now four with AI, I should say. That if I type in private schools near me, of course. Oh no, is this sponsor? Yeah, sponsor result. So you can have a sponsored result. So I almost always recommend if you have any sort of ad budget, doing Google Ads. So having a sponsored result is one spot. Another spot is in your maps listings. So these top three or four, if you have an advertisement, um, having an ad there, and then organically having a place there. So those are three, and then if there's an AI result in here, that's a fourth. So making sure you're as visible as possible is extremely important because if you can get a top three position on Google, a top three position accounts for over 50% of the clicks that happen on the page. Like by the time you get to the bottom of page one, there's almost no clicks happening let alone page two. But if you can get to a top three position, you're going to get a lot of organic traffic to your website. So if you haven't already, investing in Google in the search engine is going to give you a lot more visibility. So people are, parents are still on Google, still on niche, not necessarily here yet. Now, in terms of the channels that influence them, again, this is not a surprise that your school website is, I mean, it's the landing point. If you go to niche, the landing point ends up becoming your website. If you go to Google, your landing point becomes the website. If somebody goes to social media, your landing point eventually becomes your homepage or your website. So really honing, and we're going to talk about what parents are looking for in a website, but having a really solid website that's focused on the prospective parent is vitally important. It's many times it can be the first impression, and first impressions are everything these days. So making sure you have a really great website. Then look, presence on search and review sites. That was also very important. Emails from schools. I think this is usually a surprise that it influences them because, and it has to influence them because if they're looking at a lot of different schools, the school that stays top of mind is at least going to give them a leg up versus others that you come to an event, you do a follow-up email, and then they don't hear from you in 6 months. But if you're sending them a weekly newsletter, you're doing that follow-up that we talked about before, that can be a huge factor. And then there's social media groups, social media, school blogs. They play a role. Let me see. Top enrollment influencers, so websites, school visits. We're going to get into that here in a second. Here's what I want to get to: social media, Facebook groups, highest influence social channel, and probably not too much of a surprise for everybody because you get your parents start talking and you hope they write something good in those parent groups, those local parent groups. I know those local parent groups as well. You can also advertise in those, and they're pretty inexpensive, just a couple $100. You can make a post. So if you have an event coming up, let's say, go in those groups, pay $200 or whatever it is, and be able to make a post promoting your event. I think that's a great thing to do. And then lower down the list are organic Facebook posts, Instagram, and YouTube. So here's where I wanted to talk about what I noticed. Oh, and I see the question here: is the trend on Facebook a video post? I'm going to talk about that here now. So social media. I was looking at some social media data, and yes, amongst millennials and amongst Gen Xers, Facebook is still the number one platform. We might feel like Instagram or TikTok. Instagram is actually kind of way down the list of platforms to prioritize. Facebook and Instagram remain number one and number two. What do you all think the number one platform is for the Gen Zers, for the high schoolers, and which means and as well as your middle schoolers? And middle school, what's Gen Z? I don't even know what the breakdown is, but nonetheless, the students. What do we think the number one platform is these days for the students? Tiffany says TikTok. I'm going to say that is incorrect, which was a surprise to me. I would have guessed that, but I was wrong.
I would guess Instagram.
No, I forget if that was two or three. I think it was two. I think Instagram was two. Going once, going twice. YouTube. YouTube for the students. Every year I keep hearing more about video. I mean, we all hear about video, but video specifically on YouTube. And so one of the data points that we're going to get to here is about the influence that students have on the decision making of where they're going to go. And it's getting young, it's trending younger and younger now. Where we knew that students played the majority decision making role when it came to high school. They play a pretty significant role when it came to middle school. And I mean, we're seeing them play a role now with elementary school, right? So the trend is decision making by students is getting younger and younger. So creating content on these platforms can help engage those students as well. So it's again, is it as much of a driver as some of these others? No, but if you're going to post there thinking about, hey, our students are going to see this, is this going to be um, impactful for them as well. Um, and then the question about video on Facebook or Instagram, I think it's more important for you to be aware that social media has drastically changed in the past 12 to 18 months in terms of the algorithm. That it used to be get a bunch of followers, we create a post. Some of our followers are going to see that post. If we want more of those followers to see, we got to go boost our post and pay for it. Now, to a degree, that still holds true. But now more than ever, you have the ability to get found. I could, for example, I could start a school today, not have a social media post. I could make a post, and if I follow, the trending music and the stuff that these, Facebook and Instagram wants to utilize, I could reach thousands, if not tens of thousands of people that they could find me. That has nothing to do with my follower count. So my point there is many schools treat their social media as communication or showing what's going on for your current families. And you should do that. That helps reinforce the value proposition. But we should also start thinking about social media for prospective families because now you can reach those families that if somebody goes to Google, if I go to Google right now and I'm searching for schools, and maybe I go to a school's social media profile, essentially the algorithm is going to pick up that I'm looking for schools. And now, Tiffany, if I'm in your area, your social media post, your post might show up in my For You feed, right? Because it thinks that I want to see that now. And that's probably one of the biggest opportunities when it comes to social media. So just thinking about creating posts that give you the best opportunity to get found. And that goes back to video is usually going to uh, give you that opportunity. So if I rank priority order of how you can get found by the majority of people, it's video, but then use video with trending templates and the media. So if you open up not Facebook, Instagram on your app and you go to templates, it'll show you some templates that you can utilize, even if it's like creating a video out of static images. You use one of their templates, pick some trending music if you can, or music they're recommending. That's appropriate, of course, and that will give you the best opportunity at reaching the most amount of people. That's followed by carousel posts, which is followed by static one image posts in terms of reach beyond your follower count. What else we got here? Oh, typical research pattern. Read 6 to 8 online interviews, visit 4 to 5 websites, spend 2 to 3 hours researching before contacting the school. That is about right. That is what we see as well. That it's once they become aware you exist, they search for you on Google, they read your reviews, they check out your website. They're going to decide whether they want to take the effort, go get babysitters, whatever, and come and tour and visit the school. Let's see what else we got. Devices, no surprise, 60% plus are on mobile. Tablet's always at the bottom. So yeah, so takeaways, we went through a lot of it, but yeah, Google a niche and review platforms, priority for sure. Website, making sure your website is as fine-tuned as possible. And we're going to talk about that here in a second. And social media, it does matter. And I think one of the untapped resources are those Facebook groups. I think we all kind of keep our eye on them. And while we can't usually actively promote, and we just kind of hope and pray that parents are in there talking well about you, look into those Facebook groups. Like I know there's a huge Facebook group, parent group in our area here outside Philadelphia. I even looked into it one time about advertising and looking at that for a school. And I mean, it was only a couple $100 and you get pretty good bang for your buck there. So, as you're thinking about, let's say you have an open house coming up and you think about, okay, what are we going to do to promote this? Maybe you do some mailers, maybe you do Facebook ads, Google ads. I think it's worth it a couple $100 to go into a Facebook group. All right. Questions, surprises, anything in regards to the channels that are influencing? Anybody seen different out of curiosity? All right. All right. Touch points. So what we've regularly seen, and this is supported by niche, is that typically the number one way that a family is going to choose to engage with you is through an event of some sort. So events essentially are the new inquiry, right? Yes, they will still come to your website and fill out a form and you get contact with them, but having an event, so like again, when I'm talking with schools and helping them with campaigns, our first discussion usually around, do we have an event? Can we create an event? Can it be a virtual event? Right? I know creating an event, an open house, that involves a lot of people to get involved, right? So that's you probably do a couple of those a year, maybe. But even having virtual events, parents like those. I've seen schools do really, really well with like virtual info sessions and specifically info sessions related to a topic. Like this Tuesday, come into our financial aid info session. Next Thursday, come to our athletics info session, right? So you can have virtual info sessions on a particular topic: financial aid, athletics, academics, college readiness, whatever it is. Um, and so close to 100% of families said school visits influence their choice for the fall. Not a surprise there. 74% said virtual tours and events, and that came from niche. So if you're not doing those, it's something to consider and give it a shot, right? It's not that you have to direct all of your time, energy, and money towards doing virtual events, but I would say give them a shot if you're not doing them already. Every school that I've worked with that does those to some capacity, they are another nice channel for bringing in those top of the funnel inquiries. Um, and 73% of families said school fairs influence their decision, and 70% said community events. So, if you're at somebody's fall festival or something like that, or a school fair, just that visibility can play a role. Um, and then what did Tree say here? Campus tour, shadow days, conversations with current families. Not a surprise there. So again, big takeaway. Um, Digital is going to, like I said, get you on the list, create that awareness, get them to fill out forms. But obviously, it's the visit that's going to be really important. I was actually just having a conversation with a school, and we were looking at funnel data. And like in our software, we have a funnel tracker that shows your stage by stage conversion percentage. Okay, if we have 100 inquiries, or how many of those will schedule a tour? Of the tours, how many fill out an application? Of the applications, how many do we offer enrollment for? So understanding those conversion rates at each stage is really important. So that, getting back to this, if you're seeing like, hey, we need more applications, well, are you getting enough inquiries? But your tour to application rate is really low. In general, I think NAIS, I think they said 47%. This is national averages. 47% of tours should convert to an application. I got to double check that. What's more important is that you have your own data on that, because depending upon the type of school, and you might have higher or lower, but looking at your conversion rates is really, really important, because it can be really easy to say, well, we need more applications, we need more tours, therefore we need to go spend more on advertising. But you might be doing just fine with getting this awareness, but you're just not getting the applications because something's going on with the tour. Is it the tour experience? Is it the tour follow up? All those things can play a role. So it's just important to know those numbers, because we know that's going to influence the decision the most. Same thing for, when I say tours, open house event. Having a really awesome open house event plays a really big role. Anybody here doing virtual sessions? Any sort of virtual stuff? How did they go for you, Tiffany?
It's funny because we actually just had one. That's why I was late.
Nice.
So
How did it go?
so the virtual tour is pretty cool. We're mindful of we're very lucky in that in our high school, for example, we bring in a couple of students. And so while families are not in the building during the tours, they get to hear from a couple of our kids about their experience. And we have it's a pretty packed agenda. So we have like the director of college
Nice.
guidance, we have the dean of student life, the director and assistant director of the upper school. We have someone from counseling support, our DEI director, and then admissions. So it's a lot to organize. I would say the only downside is something that we experienced today, technical issues. So
Right.
like being able to pivot when internet goes out, which happened for the last couple of sessions we've had. But other than that, I think families walk away with a full picture of what we have to offer. So we've had a lot of success with it.
What's your step after that? So they come to the tour. What do you are you asking them then to come to a personal tour, like a one-on-one at that point?
Yeah. So because our program, we're a school for kids with learning disabilities, we have
Yeah.
to be very mindful of everyone's like resources and time. And so that's why we require families to at least do a virtual presentation before visiting. And
Right. Make sure it
so
makes sense for them. Yeah.
yeah. So for our lower school and our upper school, we send them an email afterwards, thanking them for attending the virtual session, and then we send them a link to register for a small in-person tour. And so many of those families do sign up for that, or we say you'll have a tour when you come in for the application. So because a lot of the high schoolers, this is the time where we're seeing a lot of those applications, many of those families will just wait for the interview to do the tour and interview. Whereas our lower school families, they're pretty much in that exploratory phase. And so we have them come in, we'll invite current parents to speak with them during their small group tours. And then later we'll find them with their kid for the interview.
Awesome. Awesome. Out of curiosity, do you know what your, I guess it depends on if it's the right fit for them. I didn't know if you knew what your typical conversion rate is, like what
I
percentage will come, from that, go to the virtual, will attend will come for a tour, take the next step with you.
I know we have those stats because we present it to our board. I just can't think of it right now.
That's fair, fair. Pasida, you said we were a small school and we use an iPad for a virtual tour. When you say use an iPad for a virtual tour, do you mean like you're actually going around videoing? And is that live? Is that something that's recorded? While we wait for her answer. Anybody else doing virtual or tried it? All right.
I'm sorry, did you ask
Oh,
a question?
yeah. I was just you had mentioned you said, "Hey, we use an iPad for a virtual tour." I just wanted to understand kind of what that looked like, what kind of structure that took, or what format.
So we send a Zoom link and then we walk with the iPad. So then they
Right.
can
Interesting.
see the classrooms. And we usually set it up at 10 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. That's when we do our tour so they can see the morning work period.
And is that like a scheduled every once in a while, or is that something I could do any given week?
So yeah, so if you like, we have from the website, they can self-schedule a tour and they can tell us they want to do a virtual
Hmm,
because they're not in the
interesting.
area yet. So we typically will do that for parents who are not, they have not moved yet. They will move in a month or so, or they'll move in a year or so. We've done virtual tours, and once they're in the area, then they'll come in for an actual tour. But
Nice.
many that we've actually enrolled just by doing that because they're just moving and they need a school.
So interesting. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
And did you say, do you get more virtual versus in person, like as the initial touch point?
No, more, I
No,
mean, during COVID, yes, but
sure.
more in person now. People actually want to come in. It picked up a little bit 2 weeks ago, and then now it just died a little bit. And I know what you're saying about that. I think it's gonna pick up again. And yeah, we have a little
Very cool.
situation here with the child, so it's not like
No
going in
worries,
and
no
out.
worries.
All right.
All right. All right, good stuff. All right. So let's keep moving along. We have a few more things I want to get to as we're going to approach the hour here. So let's start ripping through these. What do they look for in a school? What knocks schools off the list? Um, so here's what they're looking for the most: availability of clubs and organizations, distance, school rankings. This is a top three that plays a role. So what I mean, I always think about when I'm helping schools like building landing pages and campaigns. If you've got those, hey, best school of 2025 or whatever trust badges I like to call them that you have, put them front and center. They play a nice role. Sit campus safety, class sizes, reviews, sense of community, academic rigor. Um, so part of this goes into what we were talking about before, and even from Truth Free said academics. So in terms of what they're looking for. Um, I don't think there's any surprises here, but I will say sense of community, campus safety. Again, when I'm thinking about a lot of campaigns where we start using language that alludes to the community, the safety, especially if you're competing with, again, maybe a large public school population or something along those lines. That's very common when I say it. Those types of that types of messaging and campaigns do really, really well. Um, and then in terms of what knocks you, Phil, hand up or waving?
Question.
Go ahead, shoot.
I was just, if you scroll back to that a little bit,
Yeah,
I'm fascinated to see that when people are asked on niche surveys why they change schools, they say academics. But when they're evaluating schools, what they're looking for, academics is actually the lowest percentage on that list.
right.
That it is what people say they're looking for, but not actually necessarily what they're looking for. They're looking for the whole thing. Academics just plays one part of that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good observation. And if we think about that, what does that mean? Like they get in there thinking they want one thing, then there's, ooh, well, academics aren't what I thought they were going to be. Maybe that's part of it. Um, have you all had conversations or heard anything similar as you're bringing families in? Why they said they switched to your school? Just out of curiosity, if you feel like these match up with what you're seeing.
No, I would agree. It's actually reversed for us. Typically, academic rigor is like the top reason. We did a ISM survey to our families to ask why they picked us, what they were considering, and it was academics at the top.
Interesting, very interesting. Phil, have you noticed anything on your end in terms of where these fall in order?
I I think a lot of it comes down to, at least for our school and the schools that are similar to us, it comes down to the overall look and feel and how their child um, feels when they come home from school.
Yeah,
I think academics can even vary from year to year in an elementary school depending on the teacher. Um, and as stated, if you're looking at benchmarks like standardized testing, they're not really concerned about the standardized testing, even if they're looking for academics for a school. The
right.
reason the reason people change, I think they I think most people when they answer a survey have some kind of glorified reason as to why they want to change schools. And I think academics are the easiest thing to say we're changing because of schools. But when you're looking for new schools, even if you say you're looking for academics, there are lots of schools that do academics really well. You're looking for the it factor that makes it best for your child or your family. So you're looking for, I think, the community and the personal touch.
Yeah.
And my child loves to go to school versus, yeah, great teachers, but man, he can't stand his classmates. Has a significant impact on your choice. And since there's so many choices out there, the environment and the situation from year to year maybe could be a significant larger factor that they're just not willing to say in a survey.
Yeah, no, yeah, I think you're right. I'll also just say, just anecdotally on my end, even when we were looking for a school for my daughter, I remember talking with the head of school, and oh, why are you looking for a school? And I'm like joking, I was like, not jokingly, but it was like, oh, looking for good academics. I remember he just dismissed me. It was just like, yeah, you can get academics. Like you walk down the street, there's great schools everywhere. What are you really looking for, right? And that's where it gets to that, where especially if you're in an area with other schools, like you're going to get good academics. Like what's going to be really great for you and your family. And I think that's what you see here, especially when it comes to finding that initial school. Right. Let's keep going through here real quick. So what knocks you off the list? So what no surprise you get a negative review and people are talking poorly. Um, that influences decision making. Now, let me see. Was it in here? Parent reviews, negative. I mean, I'll just say reviews in here, and I'm just going to mention that. Look, you can't always control reviews, let alone like those spammy reviews, but I'm going to dismiss those. But one of the things I always recommend that schools do, because we know word of mouth reviews, it does play a role, whether it's the top one, two, or three things that somebody's looking for. It's there, it's front and center. You Google a school, and one of the first things you're going to see are those star ratings and some comments and on the Google reviews. And so if you're not doing this already, I would typically recommend running review campaigns maybe once a quarter, pulling in parent ambassadors, asking them to write positive reviews, both on Google and niche. Um, and that does two things. Well, actually, it does three things. One is naturally, parent goes to your Google reviews or niche reviews. It's really nice to see a review that came in last month, not from 4 years ago, about obviously something positive from the school. Two, getting more positive reviews more frequently pushes down old reviews that maybe there are some negative reviews in there. You can push those down to other pages where they're not going to see them. Third reason why getting reviews are important, it actually plays a role in your rankings in Google. That if Google sees that you're getting consistent reviews, they feel like, ooh, how should we that's like a feather in the cap for the algorithm that's going to be one of those things that can put you above somebody else if you're getting reviews and they're not, especially if they're positive reviews. So there's a lot of positive impact to getting those reviews, which may be a little bit different than what they're even talking about here, which is just maybe negative word of mouth, which is it is what it is. But at least on the review side, there's some control you can take over there. Obviously, negative visit experience, that's not going to be great. Bad open house, bad tour, that's going to be a big role. Um, Negative interactions with staff. It's interesting. Fourth one is tuition costs. So about half of the families might write you off just based upon, well, because we see this with Google Analytics. When you look at how people visited your site, they go to your homepage, they go to the tuition page, and then a certain percentage of them are just going to leave because they want to know how much tuition cost is. Um, but that's why I always say when it comes to tuition, especially if you're on the higher end of tuition, and I learned this from with my time working at ISM, which was they did a really great study with NBOA, and it was about how tuition costs didn't impact enrollment. That was the long and short of it, because it was all about the value. People will come to your school if they see the value, and if they don't, they either won't come or they won't stay. Now, with that being said, I always think about it from also the marketing angle with your tuition. That if you go to your tuition page, what does your tuition page look like? Is it just here's our tuition? Do you want to apply? Yes or no? Or does it show and talk about the investment and why it's so valuable? And can you keep people on the page and get them to continue to learn more? Do you have a great financial aid program? Hey, 35% of our families get financial assistance. We've awarded $2 million last year. If you have data like that you're really proud of, getting that on there, putting it as an infographic so that it's not just go to your website, take a look at your tuition. And by the way, is it on here? Here it is. This is on the next section. I'm jumping down. Um, Gated tuition pages is something parents do not like. That is one of the biggest complaints. I've always recommended not to have tuition pages where you give us your email and we'll send you our tuition. I've seen agencies out there say, well, that's how you collect a lead, right? That's a lead. Eh, I don't like it. I think it turns off more people than you're going to get leads. Make it transparent and focus more on the value than whether you're going to gatekeep your tuition, and you're going to treat it like that's our lead generator where you're going to get them to fill out information. So tuition, gated tuition pages in your, I think, is an important one. Let me see what else. What else was a turnoff? Challenging website navigation. So it plays a role. It was in the top, whatever. What is this? Six. Not as important as some others, but it's obviously important, right? We know that the number one landing spot for families is your website. So make sure that your website is as fine tuned as possible. Will this we be able to send a link for the recording? Yep, yep. You will get the link for the recording. You can always again go to Montessori Foundation YouTube page. Tim posts all the videos there as well. Um, let me see. Family stop pursuing a school. Location, that's an obvious one. Can't do too much about that. Tuition costs, unimpressive academics, on-campus experience. Okay, not a surprise there. Um, yeah, hard to navigate websites. So a couple things that you can really have control over: getting your own reviews. I mean, obviously, you have control over visits that are good or bad. Obviously, if you have bad visits, and how do we know if you're a bad visit? That actually goes back to those conversion rates I was talking about. If you notice that your conversions from tour or open house to the next stage of your pipeline or your admissions process is low, okay, that might be a poor visit experience in some capacity. Oh, go ahead, Tiffany.
Yes, it's going back to the location factor. Just wondered if there is a way to address it. We were located in New York City, and we're now seeing more and more families cite location as a reason why they chose not to attend. So if
Mm.
it's like a Manhattan family worried about coming to Brooklyn, and so one of the ideas that was kind of that we kind of threw out there was to have some piece about our neighborhoods like on our website. So it's to say like, oh, we have this many parks or bakery, whatever it might be, to make it sound enticing. So I think there are people who still worry about Brooklyn and what it means. And so I just want to get your thoughts
Mm.
on how to make location not as scary for folks, if that is a factor.
So, and I was actually thinking about as you were starting that, thinking in a different way, like to New York, because I work with a school in Toronto, and one of the things that they did was they were on the west part of I don't know the west part of Toronto, which is accessible by bus. They're essentially where I'm going with this. They were highlighting the transportation and how easy it was to get there. So first glance, you might think, "Ooh, that's across town," or you're in Manhattan, a mile away, might as well be 50 miles away. Um, but if you can highlight transportation, that's one. Now, in terms of location beyond that, of hey, is there a perception about the town? Then 100% talking about the community. And what I have found works really well in those cases where you're trying to highlight something without specifically saying it, meaning like, how do we say that we have a safer school and a better community than the public school? Let's just use that as an example. Um, it's a hard thing to just come out right out and say, but if you can get your parents to say it to a degree, like if there's maybe an area you're thinking about targeting, Tiffany, maybe it's like would be on the fringe of the furthest point away. Maybe you have some parents that came from there, and if they say things like, "We weren't even considering them because we thought it might be too far away, but boy, are we glad we made this decision. We found they have this, this, and this, and we just couldn't find that with where we were in Manhattan. But I'm so happy that we're able to experience the parks." And so being able to get that from um, families, be able to prompt them a little bit with what you're looking for, that can be really impactful on the website in an ad campaign. I've seen that work really well. So yeah, whether it's the location itself or just a transportation issue, I've actually seen advertise, even on the landing pages, website, in the ads talking about the transportation. If transportation is something that's like, hey, we've got these priority bus routes and subway, whatever it might be. I think that's what the school did in Toronto. They were talking about some specific routes that go directly to them that families may not have been aware about. So they felt that it was really important. All right, we're coming up on the hour. Let me go through here real quick to see what else is really important. Um, Websites, they're important. Make sure the navigation is easy. Yes, tell a story. By the way, if you ever want to know how to tell a story on your website, my favorite thing, and like when we build websites for schools, we actually use this framework, which is Story Brand by Donald Miller. Really, really great foundational element for building messaging for any website, especially for schools, and being able to tell your story. So, Story Brand is a really great resource. Read the book. I read the book. Done their workshops. That's really powerful stuff when telling the story. Um, yes, complicated navigation. Rule of thumb is always be able to get to your destination within 2 clicks, 3 clicks at most. If it needs more than that, you need to figure out how to simplify it. We already talked about gated tuition. We actually talked about this already, so we could probably skip a lot of this, which is student influence. We know that, 7 out of 10 parents are saying children play a role in choosing the school that they're going to attend. So knowing, hey, if we're going to post on social media, would this appeal to that middle schooler, right? Um, how many schools? I got this from Niche did a really good survey on this, which is they were saying 60% of families were considering 3 or more schools. So again, going back to most families, the majority of families are looking at 3 or more schools and they're taking a year plus to make a decision. There's a lot of going on there, a lot of research happening there. So essentially, I mean, they are comparison shopping. So know that if they're looking at you, you're not the only one. So the marketing has to differentiate why you, what makes us different, and this goes back to a lot of the messaging we've been talking about. So as we wrap up, what this all means. So I summarized. Um, Got to be visible on Google. AI is only going to play more of a role, but even if you just do Google Ads, get in the Maps listings, organically showing up in the top three, that's a priority. You will get a lot of traffic that way. Um, Let me see. Looking at your website, take a look at your website. Is it easy to navigate? Do you have to put in your email to get your tuition? That is something I would stop doing immediately. Um, Long-term communication, right? That could be email nurture, putting people um, onto your newsletter. So because we know they're looking for so long, 6 months, 12 months, being able to stay top of mind is a priority. Make sure you have great tours and events and that event experience. Again, the event is the new inquiry, whether that's a virtual info session, a virtual tour, an open house. That's what families are looking to do as their first touch point. All right. Let me see. And I'm going to share this. Let me just share this with everybody on here so that you can read through it. Anyone with the link can view. So just make a copy of this if you want. Put this in the chat. All right. That is for everybody. So you can go through it and take some time to go through it in more detail. But yeah, I know we approached the hour. Thanks everybody for hopping on. Any questions? I hope this was helpful, but any questions, anything surprising, anything we didn't go over you were hoping?
I'm actually still surprised that mobile isn't higher on the list for web search and web browsing than what was it, 60 something percent
Yeah,
that you
I
had on
agree with
there.
you. I agree with you. Yeah, I think that's a good point. What was it, 67%? I think that's what it was. Whatever that was. Yeah, tablets remain low, but yeah, so especially from a website experience, you always want to make sure you're mobile first. We still want to make sure we're mobile first, that um the experience, making sure that there's a good experience on both. And I actually think about it from the perspective of the order of which things are displayed on the site. So like on desktop, something might be side by side, but on mobile, it's going to get stacked. Which stacks first? I actually think that's really important from a conversion perspective. That especially if you want somebody to book a tour or register for an event, and maybe you have your headline on one side and your description, and then your form on the other side. Well, when you go to mobile, does that form go down to the bottom? Do I have to now scroll for that form? So yeah, looking at things like that, between desktop and mobile is, remains important. All right, everybody. Well, thanks for staying a few minutes late. Trying to think if there's anything else. No, I hope this was helpful. Stay tuned. Keep an eye on your email for our Thursday invitations, our Tuesday invitations for the webcast and webinar. And thanks for everybody for unmuting. Always interactivity is always helpful with these, rather than me just talking. But yeah, I will hopefully see you all next week. Take care, everybody. Bye.